What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today is the Game Week preview ahead of Game Week 12. And I probably say this every single week, but there is a lot to go through and a lot of big topics this week. So premium players, after what happened in Game Week 11, are on everyone's minds. How many is too many? Which ones should we target? Should we rotate them? That kind of thing. Double game weeks have been announced, one of the most exciting times of the season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We don't have all the info just yet, but there's chip strategy and things like that I want to touch on. Which teams to target? If we're going for premium players, are there alternative defenders to Liverpool Defenders, for example? What to do with Calvert-Lewin? It's all included in this one. I just really quickly, before we jump into it, wanted to say what I kind of try and do with this video, right? Because I know it's starting to creep up to the 25 to 30 minute mark, but there is a lot to cover, right? And I almost see this as my podcast almost. And one day I might do a podcast. I've got some thoughts about that, whether I do it solo or with another person or another two people, something like that. Maybe that will happen at some point. But I see this as kind of right now a bit like my solo podcast where I talk about specific topics and try and be as concise as possible without, when I do it on a stream, obviously there's sometimes distractions, other questions come in, I start talking about them, super chats and stuff like that. In this one I try and be a bit more concise, and that's why I've started putting in the topics, rather than having them all on one page, putting them in individually, so you know if you want to skip through the video which topics to go and look at. So that's what the aim for this. So if it does go to 30 minutes, it doesn't mean, obviously I want you to watch it all, but you don't have to if there's certain topics you want to skip straight through. And I'll try and start putting maybe timestamps to help out with that. But that's kind of the idea with this video, is to give a concise thought about all the big topics of the week in one video, essentially. So a bit like a podcast, I would say. So that's kind of my vision with this. I know some people want just 5-10 minute videos. You're not going to get that on my channel. It's not how I like to do things, and it's not how I've ever done them. So just wanted to get that out of the way. I know I've been doing this for ages, but I thought I'd just quickly mention I'm not going to talk about this every single week. But like I said, there is a lot to go through. So hit that like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump into it. Okay, so after what happened last week, pretty much every single player over 9 million returned points in one way or another. And a lot of them got kind of 10-point plus hauls, right? So the question has kind of turned from which one or two should we have to should we have 3 or 4? If so, who to target? And if so, should we start swapping them about, right? So like Bruno Fernandes to Salah this week and Salah to De Bruyne next week, for example, is something I've seen people doing. And I think as kind of blanket advice or opinion on that, I don't really mind it. I think targeting the best captain every single week is a decent strategy. It's something I've been doing this season. It's been going quite well. And so swapping out premium big hitters because of that is not a bad idea to do. But of course, at some point you are going to have other transfers you want to or need to make, right? Injuries, COVID positive tests and stuff like that. Might be rotation, who knows, right? But there's other stuff you might want to do. And we are getting closer to double game weeks, which I'll touch on later. It's probably not something we need to start worrying about right now. But at some point, we're going to want to start rolling transfers or maybe thinking a little bit further ahead. And swapping premium hitters every single week is not necessarily ideal. Although, again, for captaincy strategy, it is a good idea. Now, for me, the reason why I'm not really massively looking to rotate my premiums, because I feel like there are two particular ones that I want to target right now. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll know exactly who I'm going to say. It's Salah and it's Kevin De Bruyne. And the reason is captaincy. So you look at these two from game week 12 to 15. So this is 4 game weeks, right? And some of you already have one of them. So either you've got both already, you've probably got one of them, and then you can just add the other one this week, which would be Mo Salah. Now, he is obviously the one to target for this week, but I think for the next 4, having both is ideal, right? So you've got Salah versus Fulham away in game week 12. In game week 13, you've got Kevin De Bruyne versus West Brom at home. In game week 14, it's a little bit different because the fixture's not quite brilliant for either side. For De Bruyne, it's Southampton away, and for Salah, it's Palace away, I believe. And Palace away is not actually that bad of a fixture, and we'll talk about teams to target later on. You could, for game week 14, go Fernandes, Leeds at home if you wanted to, but I don't think Salah or De Bruyne is a bad option, especially Salah against Palace. And then in game week 15, it's West Brom at home for Salah again. So over the next 4 weeks, you're going to captain Salah twice, maybe 3 times, and Kevin De Bruyne for that West Brom game. But also, Man City's fixtures outside of that, although you're not going to captain him, they're also still really good. Whereas someone like Kane and Son, for example, they got Palace away this week. So while a few weeks ago, I was considering getting rid of them, and I did get rid of Kane, I kept Son for other reasons, right? Other stuff cropped up, which is why he ended up staying in my team. If I had him now, I probably wouldn't sell him this week. I certainly wouldn't buy Kevin De Bruyne or Bruno Fernandes this week. Maybe if I had to swap those Spurs players to get Salah in, that's a different story. But they've got one of the best fixtures this week out of all the premiums, so I would not get rid of them. But long term, I'm not sure where I'm going to captain them again. Like game week 16, a lot of people have already spotted that. It's Fulham at home. But in that week, Salah has Newcastle away, right? Which is not as good a fixture, but it's right up there. Newcastle are not a good defensive team, and obviously Liverpool are brilliant attacking-wise. So game week 16 is still a fantastic option for Salah. So if you wanted to go without Spurs players for a little while, it wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world, I don't think. I know they did really well this week. But again, Kane got 12 points, De Bruyne got 14, Salah got 14, Son got 13. So if you didn't have Kane this week, he didn't necessarily hurt your rank as long as you had one of the other premium hitters. So it's not, you can't have them all, basically, I guess is what I'm saying. So for me, Salah and De Bruyne are the clear two that I would want right now. That might change in a few weeks, but right now they're the two that I would target. And then the third one I would probably look at is Bruno Fernandes. Now, his expected goal involvement is very close to Kane for the season, but obviously he's a midfielder, so extra point for any goals he scores, extra point for the clean sheet as well. He's probably going to play 90 minutes most game weeks. He's on penalties too. Obviously, Kane is as well. I'm not taking that away from him. Bruno Fernandes, with the fixtures he's got coming up, I think it's Sheffield United away, Leeds at home, game week 13 and 14 that flipped around, so it's Sheffield United first and then it's Leeds. They're pretty good fixtures, whereas Kane's got to play Wolves, Leicester and Liverpool after Crystal Palace. So I think the Crystal Palace game is fine, but after that, if I was going to go for three, it would be Salah, De Bruyne and Fernandes for me. There's some caveats, of course, right? If De Bruyne's got good fixtures, so does Sterling. He's just shown what he can do. Fernandes, Son and Kane will probably all be good for minutes. Liverpool have now got Jota, so we could see more rotation for the likes of Mane and Salah, but I don't expect a huge amount for me. Werner, as well, is a potentially good option. He's still getting loads of good chances, but he's not quite putting them away. You're definitely not going to consider captaining him anytime soon, I don't think. So there's lots of options you can go for. I think if we're saying premium is 9 million plus, you could fit 4 in. You are going to have to make some sacrifices elsewhere in your team, and everyone's going to have to decide themselves whether that is worth it, because not everyone's got the same team value. Not everyone jumped on the players at the same time. So for me, I can fit 4 premiums in without really hurting my team too much. But I still might want to have that money in the bank and reserve for something else. And obviously, if you have 4 options, then you block a lot of the other captaincy. So if you had Salah and De Bruyne and a lot of people captain Fernandes, you've still got him. So if he does go mad, you still get a lot of the points anyway. But maybe you lose some money, or maybe you lose some points elsewhere. And ultimately, I think once you've got the kind of 2 or 3, maybe max, that you would captain, the rest of them don't matter as much. And if you've already got them, it's fine. I'm not saying you have to sell them, but I don't think there's necessarily as much of a need. So the max I'm going to go for is 4, and I'm still heavily debating that. I'm certainly not making a decision this week. But 3 is definitely something I want. So Salah, De Bruyne, and it's probably going to be Fernandes, although this week it's Son. I'm fine with that because of the Crystal Palace fixtures. So there's a lot. You probably have more flexibility with 3, I would say. But there are some probably alternatives you have to think about in defence. So let's talk about that. I'm going to go for the Liverpool defence first, and then we'll talk about some alternative defenders. So really quickly touch on Liverpool defenders, because I want to talk about the alternatives. The alternative defenders are going to be the ones that allow you to potentially get up to 4 premiums. But we should touch on Liverpool defenders because Trent Alexander-Arnold is now back. He got some minutes in the last game, and I fully expect him to now continually start. There might be some times when Nico Williams steps in for rotation, and the fact he's just back from injury, Trent that is. So potentially we might see that, but he's going to start the majority. And that defence is still looking really strong. Like Fabinho and Matip are not a bad centre-back partnership. It's not Van Dijk and Gomez, but it's still one of the best centre-back partnerships in the league, I would say. And you've got Robertson and Trent, and then Alisson behind when he's fit, which shouldn't be too much longer. It's really good. And also, it's worth pointing out, as I have done with kind of the captaincy, the fixtures are ridiculous over Christmas. So you got Fulham, Spurs, Palace, West Brom, Newcastle, Southampton, right? I could see them getting a clean sheet in pretty much any of those games. Even the Spurs one. Spurs are going to try and counter-attack them. It could work because Liverpool are going to attack Spurs, and maybe that will give opportunities to Kane and Son on the counter. But I could see clean sheets in literally any of those games. Even if you take out the Spurs one, that's still a really good set of fixtures. And I think anyone that just thinks they're no longer options, Liverpool defenders, is maybe in for a bit of a shock when they start turning up with double-digit hauls again. Now, I had a look at their numbers for this year versus last year, right? So they're both 7.2 million now. I kind of already spoke on the watch list video that I'd probably go for Robertson because I think he has stepped it up a little bit this year, and Trent is kind of tracking a little bit less than the last couple of years. So Robertson's expected goal involvement, so this is expected goals and expected assists per 90 minutes. And I like per 90 because it kind of flattens and puts everyone on the same kind of level. Although obviously there's always caveats, like you know, if Robertson plays against Fulham and Trent gets benched, and then Robertson gets benched against United or something, and Trent plays against United, then obviously it's not quite the same. But overall, over a good span of games, per 90 minutes is pretty decent. So Robertson's is 0.23 expected goals, expected assists. So you'd expect on average an attack and return 1 every 5 games if he kept that up. Last year it was 0.27, so he's actually dropped a little bit so far. But obviously, they have had a lot of injuries, both in midfield and in defence. So that's probably hurt him a bit. And then Trent is 0.24, so he's actually tracking slightly ahead. But last year was 0.36, and the year before 0.28. So he's also slightly lower and much closer to Robertson. And given Robertson's getting so far forward, and I did videos earlier in the season where I was talking about how he is getting into the box more, he is getting more touches in the final third, he's more likely to get a goal for me, and so that he is probably the one I would target. I don't think you necessarily need Liverpool defenders, right? But if you weren't going for 4 premiums, you're maybe just trying to fit 2 or 3, and you probably do have some spare cash. And if you've got a cheap forward line, like you're not going for likes of Harry Kane and players like that, or Vardy or whoever it might be, Cavani maybe, then there is money to spend in defence. And I feel like some people have maybe written Liverpool defence off, even though they're still an extremely strong team with good defensive stats, good attacking stats. And at some point in time, Robertson and Trent are going to be value, and it could be right now with these fixtures. And of course, if you buy them, it doesn't mean you can't sell them again. I think that's something we always forget, is once you buy a player or when you sell a player, you can buy them back or you can sell them again. That's a completely viable thing to do. So Liverpool defenders still looking good, if not maybe slightly reduced attacking threat so far from last year. But the more players they get back fit, especially in midfield, the more this is going to help. I think the 4-3-3 in particular, when they go back from that, then these two boys are going to provide quite a bit of width, while Mane and Salah kind of step inside quite a lot. So they are good options, but there are some alternatives, so let's talk about them as well. Okay, so while I still think Liverpool defenders are great, and I think over the next 5 to 6 weeks they'll probably show us just how great they are, I do think probably for the first time since maybe last season or even the season before, there are some genuine contenders to their position basically for a lot less money. So Chelsea, for example, a team I've talked about a lot, lowest expected goals so far this season at 8.71 for 11 games. That's pretty decent, right? And obviously teams like Man City are just behind them, so they're doing pretty well as well, but they've played 1 less game. So for Chelsea to be ahead of them, that really is impressive. And again, I was talking about the expected goal involvement stats for both Robertson and Trent just a minute ago. So just to remind you, Trent is 0.24 per 90 so far, and Robertson's 0.23. Chelsea boys are just behind them. So Chilwell is 0.21, and Reece James is 0.22. So there's hardly anything in it. Both good attacking fullbacks. There's perhaps some argument to be made that while Ziyech is injured, right? The thing with Ziyech is, holds the ball up, maybe cuts inside, Reece James goes past him. And also, one thing Ziyech did a lot was try and throw the ball over to the left, especially for Chilwell on that back post. We saw him do that quite a lot. That's how the goal happened against Sheffield United. So there are some arguments to be made that maybe they're not quite as good without Ziyech, but I'm not sure. One, he's going to be out a huge amount of time, like for the, he's not going to be out for the rest of the season, obviously. And also, there's still going to be good options regardless. So yeah, I do think there's something to be said there, but they're still both great options. Chilwell's obviously above 6 million now, but Reece James, even though he went up last night, he's still only 5.3 million. That's nearly 2 million less than Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. Attacking wise, pretty much just the same. Attacking threat, that is, and defensively, they're looking like one of the best teams in the league. So really good option. They do have some poor fixtures coming up, but I do think there's some good fixtures in there too. So Everton away, Wolves away, West Ham at home, Arsenal away, Villa at home, Man City at home. Is not fantastic, but there's some teams in there that aren't really scoring too many goals right now. I've spoken about this before, Wolves and Arsenal in particular. I can see clean sheets against West Ham, Villa, etc. And I think sometimes I talk about captaincy, how you just forget about how good a team might be improving defensively, and just realise they're playing Liverpool, right? So Fulham, for example, this week, who cares how good defensively they're getting? They're playing Liverpool. Salah's a great option. And some of these teams, doesn't matter how good they are in attack, Chelsea are very good in defence. We've already seen them get clean sheets against Spurs and Man United already. So definitely alternatives. And I've already got Chilwell, and I am strongly considering getting Reece James in as well. All right, so maybe their attacking threat will be slightly down because of the teams they're facing, but overall I still think that they're good value options. Reguilon is someone that I've had in my team for a while. Maybe got a bit lucky with him. I did kind of regret it straight away, but he's been great. Attacking wise, 0.14 expected goal involvement per 90, so a little bit further behind, but still quite good. And he's now playing the Spurs side that's kept 4 clean sheets in a row and is very much looking like a Jose Mourinho side, which is interesting if you want to kind of cover a defence. Or you can even get Dyer for cheaper. But in terms of attacking threat, I do think Reguilon on his day, perhaps when he's not playing like a Man City or an Arsenal or a Chelsea or something like that, is probably going to be more attacking. And Spurs' defensive stats aren't bad either. 12.22 expected goals conceded. That's the 5th best, right, for Spurs. So 12.22 versus Chelsea at 8.71. So not too far off. That is just over a goal a game, I guess. Whereas Chelsea is under a goal a game. But it's still decent, one of the best sides in the league. So that's someone to consider as well. Like I said just a minute ago for Kane and Son, they do have Liverpool, Leicester and Wolves to play soon. So maybe it's not the ideal time to bring Reguilon in. But he is another alternative, I would say, to Trent and Robertson. And his Man City defenders. Now, if I was bringing in a Man City defender now, I think it would be Diaz or nobody. I just think because of price and obviously rotation worries for Cancelo. Now, interestingly, his expected goal involvement is only 0.1. But all that comes from goal threat, whereas a lot of the kind of Chelsea players, Liverpool players, etc., most of their expected goal involvement comes from expected assists. Now, you might say, 0.2 is double 0.1, but if you're saying that, for 0.2 you're getting maybe 2 assists in every 10 games, 0.1 for Diaz is 1 goal in every 10 games, but the goals are worth double, if you can follow me. So potentially it's just as good. And the fixtures are brilliant for City. So I do think he is another viable option. The only thing I would say about that is obviously if you get 2 assists in 10 games versus 1 goal, that 1 goal is the only game where you're going to get additional bonus for scoring. Whereas in the assist games, you could get bonus points in both of them. So that's something that could kind of even out. But basically, if you want to go for big premiums, I do think defence is one way you can save money. Up front, we already know about Bamford, Calvert-Lewin, Watkins, Antonio, etc. Antonio, bingo, there you go. But defence is definitely somewhere. If you didn't want to go for Liverpool players, there are some alternatives. I think Chilwell, Reece James in particular, looking extremely good at Chelsea. Reguilon if you want to go for Spurs, or Dyer if you want to go even cheaper. And I still think if you haven't got a Man City defender after the Man United game, DS looks like a really good bet too. So double game weeks are finally announced. Now we don't have all the info on all the double game weeks yet and all the teams that are going to play, etc. We've got a little bit of information, so I wanted to talk about it a little bit. And we are going to talk about Mikel Antonio. So not only is that just 1 Antonio bingo for this video, it's actually 2 now. And I'll probably mention him again before the video is out. I know I've seen the comments where people say I basically mention him every single week. So I don't want to disappoint you, and I've mentioned him like twice in this one. But I know that every single season there are new people to the channel and there's new people to FPL. And when I tweeted out yesterday about double game weeks, I got some questions. Basically, very simple. What the hell is a double game week? So I'm going to quickly, briefly explain that and then talk a little bit more about what's happened. So a lot of you will know what a double game week is, but stay with me because there is more important information coming. So essentially, it's where a team plays 2 fixtures inside 1 game week. So to give you an example, let's say I told you that Man United had a double game week in game week 12. They don't, by the way, so don't panic. But if I said they did, and it was Burnley at home and Liverpool at home, right? That means the game week 12 deadline would pass. We'd then be into the matches. Man United would play their Burnley game maybe at the weekend, and then they would play Liverpool in midweek, and then game week 12 would shut, and then we'd have the game week 13 deadline maybe a day, 2, 3 days, whatever later, right? So they get to play 2 fixtures, i.e. there's potential for double the points if a player plays in both. Obviously, some players are more nailed on to play both than others. We'll get into that more when we get closer to the actual double game weeks and talking about which players to target. And yeah, anything can happen, right? Players could play twice, players could play no times, they could just play once, etc. And for that to happen, you have a blank game week. So there'll be a game week where a team doesn't play. So in game week 1, for example, Man United and Man City did not play a fixture. They had a blank game week because their game had to be rescheduled because of all the lack of pre-season, basically. And what's happening now is we found out there's going to be some double game weeks in game week 19, and that's because their game week 18 fixture has been moved to reschedule because of FA Cup fixtures. Now, so far what we know is West Ham and West Brom game has been moved. So that means West Ham will now play Burnley and West Brom at home in game week 19. That's their double game week. I hope you're following this. And West Brom will play Wolves and West Ham away in game week 19. But both West Ham and West Brom will not play in game week 18. So if you go into game week 18 with 3 West Ham players, for example, none of them will play in game week 18. Now we're still expecting, I think, up to 4 or 5 fixtures still to be changed. So this is why I was talking about saving your free hit recently when people were talking about using it for last week. There's potentially going to be 4, 5 or 6 fixtures off in game week 18. That's a lot of players missing And all of those that are missing will then have a double game week probably in game week 19 where you're going to want them. So the strategy will be, let's say you've not got a wild card like me, you might get through to kind of game week 16, 17 and start thinking about the players you want for game week 19 who are going to play twice. Because they don't play in game week 18, you use your free hit to then get players that are playing, and then in game week 19 you get your team back, right? I hope you're following this. I know it's really confusing if you've not done it before, but that's basically how it's going to work, and that's why the free hit is so valuable. So a few things I would say is don't panic just yet. All we know is there's 2 teams with double game weeks, and let's be honest, who's targeting West Brom players? Maybe the goalkeeper, but outside of that, probably not too many players you're going to go for. West Ham players, right? If you've already got them, Bowen, Antonio when he's fit, maybe Souček as your bench option. They all look quite good already for the double game week as well as the defenders. Now, we're going to get into a situation where people start, I'll do this because I do it every year, we'll hold players for like 5 game weeks because they have a double game week down the line, right? And if that player is a bad option or they've got bad fixtures in between, they're probably still worth getting rid of. But what I would say with West Ham is their fixtures are still quite good. They're coming up. They've got a good fixture run, and you can probably hold on to them. They're quite cheap. If, for example, Bowen starts to look bad or Antonio gets injured, you still ship them out, but they are maybe players that you could start to look to hold. But if there are better players to bring in or captain options to bring in, I would definitely still prioritise them for the next few weeks until we get closer. Now, the last kind of point to talk about is probably when will we find out the next lot of fixtures. If you follow a guy called Ben Crellin on Twitter, he's way ahead of the game on this usually, and he's hopeful that the TV fixtures will be announced in the second half of December, so hopefully before game week 15. So if you've got your wild card now and you're not desperate to use it, just hold it, because the hope is by game week 16 when you have to use it, you'll be able to put a team together to target that double game week much better than those of us that don't have it. But until we know the fixtures, that's impossible to say. Like right now, my team is full of Liverpool, Man United, or it's going to be full of Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea players. If they all had a double game week, then it doesn't matter that I've not got the wild card because I've already got the players in place. If they all blank, or sorry, if they all don't have double game week because they play in game week 18, then I'm in a little bit more of trouble. So there's not really any way to start strategizing that yet because we don't know the fixtures. But I wanted to talk about the fact they're announced. You don't need to panic just yet, but we are going to find out more. And if you've got your free hit, I would highly recommend keeping it. Okay, so I wanted to touch on teams to target, right? So these are teams to target with your attackers because they've got poor defensive stats. We might look at some point teams that got a bad attack, which might be good for your defenders. But right now we're talking about teams with bad defensive stats so far this season. Now we've had 11 game weeks. Every team has played at least 10 games. That's a pretty good sample size. And I've looked at overall expected goals conceded as well as shots in the box. And a lot of the teams are on both lists, right? So for expected goals conceded, the worst teams so far are West Brom, Leeds and Fulham, the 3 promoted sides. Now, you've probably heard me sometimes say that Leeds' defence is still quite good, and I do think they've had some tough fixtures, and when they play the likes of West Ham, Burnley and games like that they've got coming up, I would be quite hopeful of some clean sheets still, but you cannot deny on their day they are very good at conceding goals. And when Bruno Fernandes plays them in game week 14, for example, that could be a good fixture. But the 3 promoted sides are the worst. And then you've got Everton, right? Now, most people, I think part of this is to kind of evaluate who you're targeting, because pre-season we probably weren't looking at Everton, especially after that Spurs game week 1. I thought they were going to be good defensively, but I've had to readjust how I think about them. They seem to concede every single game week, and they have done for the last 6 or 7. Their expected goals conceded is 17.01. That's only one kind of better than Fulham. Right, so Everton really bad so far this season. Sheffield United 16.64. Another team that has not been good defensively, no clean sheets yet, and they are perhaps not such a bad team to target. I know they only conceded 2 against Liverpool and 1 against City, but Chelsea were able to put 4 past them, which shows that they can be taken advantage of if you get it right. And then Crystal Palace, another team. How many times have I and others said in the past, it's a Roy Hodgson team. He's going to keep it tight. It's going to be hard to score against them. Well, their expected goals conceded is 15.1. So they are the, 6th worst team. And if you look at shots in the box, so I won't read off all the numbers, but West Brom are the worst, then Leeds, then Sheffield United. So all 3 teams still on the same list. Then Fulham, then Newcastle. So Newcastle jump onto shots in the box, but not necessarily quality of shots. And Palace and Everton are still in there as well. So Newcastle are the only one to kind of join. And I think I've looked at an extra team there as well. So they're the kind of teams that I'd probably be looking to target. And maybe I'm not saying like if you see a player's playing Everton, then you have to bring in an attacker and captain them. But I think suddenly when you look at a fixture ticker and you see Everton on there and you see Sheffield United, who from last season might not be seen as that bad of a move to make or that bad of a team to play, right now they kind of are. Like sometimes you'd be like, oh, they're playing Everton, then they're playing Sheffield United. My attackers probably won't get too many points. This season, it doesn't look like that is going to be the case. It is worth saying this is still a short sample size, right? When I look at last season's defensive stats, Everton I think were in the top 7, so they can be a good side. But obviously they're missing Luca Dean, they're missing Seamus Coleman. They've got a whole new midfield which I thought would be brilliant defensively. I really did. Decore and Allen in there as well, but it hasn't transpired to be so. And obviously Pickford is not. I mean, we can have a whole video about Pickford. Sometimes he makes these fantastic saves, and other times he makes these big mistakes, and he would always be a worry for me. So. Again, not saying you have to completely readjust all your thinking. Like a lot of people are still targeting West Brom and Fulham, and I definitely am as well. Leeds to a certain extent. But Everton, Sheffield United and Crystal Palace are probably 3 that we probably didn't or wouldn't have picked up on pre-season. But maybe the other teams we should stop worrying so much about if we've got attackers playing against them. And lastly, let's touch on Calvert-Lewin. Now, I did mention him last week because I wanted to get people thinking about the potential to remove him because the fixtures were about to turn, and they do turn from this week. And I want to talk about whether it's a good idea to remove him or not. I've talked about potentially removing him from my team. I'm not 100% set on doing that. I'm potentially up for the idea of doing it, but going through with it is a different matter. And I don't think, without trying to sit on the fence too much, right, there isn't a right or wrong answer to this. On one side, you're getting the top scorer in the league for 7 million in some cases. Right? A lot of us jumped on early, 7.1, 7.2 million. The top scorer in the league. That's probably not something to be sniffed at, right? More goals than Son, more goals than Kane, etc. When you say it like that, it's a bit crazy to even think about getting rid of him. But on the other side, he's gone up to 8 now. So if you got on him early, you could sell him for 7.5, make some money. And he's about to come into a fixture run that's got Chelsea, Leicester, Arsenal, Sheffield United and Man City. So Man City and Chelsea, 2 best defensive teams so far, underlying stats-wise, so that's going to be difficult. Leicester, hit or miss, they have been conceding quite a bit recently. Sheffield United is a team I just spoke about, one of the teams to potentially target. And Arsenal, again, not a team that's necessarily kept too many clean sheets so far this season. So 3 of the next 5 were okay, but overall, as of 5, they're not great. Everton are also missing Luca Dean and Coleman at the moment. Coleman should be back first, but we don't know when just yet. He has started training again, so hopefully he'll be back soon. It is worth pointing out, without kind of going into the minute details, that Luca Dean's missed 3 games and Calvert-Lewin has scored in 2 of them. So maybe it's not the end of the world for him to be missing out. No player in the league has a higher non-penalty expected goals than Calvert-Lewin either. So he hasn't just scored 11 goals, he's backing that up with stats. And that's important because you want to kind of hope or feel that he can keep it going, right? And I'm not saying he's going to go and score another 11 goals in the next 11 games, right? But he could still come in with like maybe 5, 6, 7, which would still be a pretty good return. Now, he almost reminds me of a situation I had a couple of seasons ago. Wolves were new to the league. I jumped on Raul Jimenez earlier. I think it was game week 5, and he was 5.5 million. So that is a big difference, right? Don't get me wrong. The minimum you could have got Calvert-Lewin for was 7. Raul Jimenez was 5.5, so much easier to hold. But there was a time where he had a set of tough fixtures over Christmas, and people either were put off buying him or they sold him, and everyone regretted it pretty much because he only scored, I think it was 3 in the next 6 or 7, but he went on to score loads more after that, and he wasn't really a priority transfer out. And for me, if I think back to my kind of tips and opinions of what I was going to do this season to kind of change and learn from previous seasons, is when I target a player as someone I have to sell. And so I could look at Calvert-Lewin's fixtures and say, right, his points are definitely going to go down, which I do think they will over these next 5. And therefore I need to sell him. But actually I don't need to sell him, okay? So if a point comes up in transfers where you want to fund a move where you absolutely have to get a player, let's say it's Salah captain this week, De Bruyne captain next week, whatever, and your best way of doing it, or the best player to sell, is Calvert-Lewin, there is probably an argument to do it. I don't think, especially if you haven't got like someone like Bamford, Calvert-Lewin to Bamford seems like a choice that will not heavily backfire. But for my team, for example, I have Salah, I have De Bruyne, I can get Fernandes without selling Calvert-Lewin and basically move back to a 3-4-3 where I've got Watkins, Bamford, Calvert-Lewin and $1 million in the bank. It just means I don't also have Son as well as Fernandes. Maybe that's the better play. Why am I actively looking at ways to get rid of Calvert-Lewin? Of course, if I want to keep Son, then something has to give. And then it's a weighing up of, is Son plus hardly any money in the bank, better than Calvert-Lewin versus a better defence and a bit more money to spend, right? That's something I will have to weigh up, and everyone will have to do this individually. And maybe if you got on him later, like 7.8, 7.9 million, it's a little bit easier to sell as well. What I would say is, if you're determined or you really think it is a good option to sell him, don't worry too much about the money you'll lose. I've said this before, you haven't lost it, you've gained money and you're making the most of it. And he probably is going to go down in points over these next few fixtures. And he's not going to be captained heavily, right? So that's not something to worry about. He has got a few times where it's just 5 or 6 points because he's either got a yellow card or no bonus or whatever. So he's not got massive ceiling, although against easier teams he does. So Sheffield United, could he get 1 or 2 attack and returns? He potentially could. But the captaincy thing doesn't really matter because he's only 7 million. He's not blocking you from getting your captain. So I'm not really trying to sit on the fence, not fit on the sense, sit on the fence. I just think there is no right or wrong. It depends on your team. And if you can get the players you want without selling him, there's probably no reason to sell him. But if there is a way you can get the perfect team, and it doesn't include Calvert-Lewin, then go for it. So that's it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. I'd say that was quite long, but to be honest, I've not even checked because I'd rather fit in what I want to talk about than try and get it down to some arbitrary time frame. So hopefully you did enjoy it. And if you did, please do give it a like and hit subscribe if you're new around here. And as always, leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of what I've said. Are you looking to sell Calvert-Lewin? Do you think I've got it wrong? What about Liverpool defenders? Are they going to be must-have over the next few weeks? And the most important question probably this week, which premium players are the ones to target over the next 4 to 5 weeks? I'll put up a pinned comment probably for you to get back to me on that. If you want to support me and the channel a little bit further, we've had quite a few new patrons recently, so thanks very much for that. We're close to hitting the 200 mark, and it'll give you a few extra perks and benefits. So early team reveals once I've made my transfers and stuff like that. All these videos put into podcasts over on Patreon as well. There's Slack access, really good community on Slack, by the way. I love the interactions that you lot have with each other. There's WhatsApp access depending on what tier you go for as well. And everyone that signs up goes on the Patreon Legends wall. So thank you very much to everyone that has already signed up. And also to the new people that have signed up this week, or since the last video, I should say. So Bart K and Declan are as well. So I hope you're enjoying things. There's been extra Q&As this week. There'll be an extra Q&A on Thursday night or Friday morning as well. So make sure to check that out. All the tiers are listed. There's a link in the description below. Easy as that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I'll be back tomorrow for stream. I almost forgot then, at 8 o'clock. I'll also have a captaincy video out either tomorrow or Friday. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to do it yet because of the early deadline. And there'll be a deadline stream at 5:30 till 6:30 on Friday as well. So plenty. You do not want to be missing out. Hit that notification bell once you've hit subscribe. And I will catch you tomorrow for more FPL.